Welcome, everybody, to the first ever episode of the In the Field podcast. I'm Mr. Colby. I'm the ag agent here in Allen County, Kentucky, and I've got my two co-hosts with me. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, I'm Jason Phillips, and I'm the Simpson County Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources.
And I'm Adam Huber, the Monroe County Agriculture and Natural Resources Extension Agent.
So, guys, we finally got it all together. We've got the first episode going here. I know we've got a lot of different people we work with and throughout our counties. But for those people that are new to Extension, maybe not know what the office does, can we each go around and tell a little bit about ourselves, our background, and kind of what our county looks like? And we'll start with Jason since he's been doing it the longest.
Well, I started in 2005, so I have been working in this same position for 21 years in the same county, and it is my home county. So I went to the University of Kentucky and got a bachelor's of science in agricultural economics, and I got a master's in agriculture from Western Kentucky University. And just real quickly, I work with a diversity of producers in Simpson County. I would say our mainstay is grain production. We got a lot of corn, wheat, soybeans across the county. Relatively open, not pretty flat as a whole. So very grain-based local economy, but also we got quite a few beef cattle in the county. One dairy, we've seen a big reduction. When I started, now again, that was 21 years ago, we had about 12 dairies, and we're down to one dairy now. We've also grow a fair bit of tobacco, a lot of dark air cured and dark fire cured on a percentage basis, which I know you all have a little bit more burley tobacco, but definitely got a fair bit of dark fired and dark air cured tobacco, and so commercial horticulture is also growing in popularity, and I work a lot with that aspect as well as home vegetable gardeners. And like I always say, if it's alive and outside, then we deal with it. And we've got some forestry production, but a little bit more so in the east side of the county. But that's it's pretty open, so not a whole lot of forestry production.
But Jason, I know, been doing it a long time, and Adam here to my right, he's been in Monroe County for a little bit. He actually, when he moved, that's how I got here in Scottsville. So, Adam, tell him a little bit about how you got started and tell us a little bit about Monroe County.
Yeah, so I grew up on a beef cattle farm in Metcalfe County, then went to Cumberland County. That's where I graduated, and that's where we live now, my wife and I, there in Cumberland County. Yeah, so you mentioned I started in Allen County. That was my first, job in extension. Worked here in Allen County, where we're sitting at today, recording this in Allen County. Worked here for 6.5 years. Really got kind of going here in Allen County. I went to college at Eastern Kentucky University, got a bachelor's degree in agricultural business, and then got a master's at Murray State University in agriculture education. So that's kind of my background for education. Transferred to Monroe County in 2024 in November. And so I've been there for about a little over a year and a half now. So Monroe County is a good county to work in. A lot of agriculture, pretty diverse there. Beef cattle, a lot of hay forage production there. Got quite a bit of grain. We got 4 dairies there in Monroe County. Quite a bit of tobacco as well. We used to have some hemp in Monroe County. I had some producers growing some hemp. And kind of like Jason said, we kind of see a little bit of everything that walks through that door. You just never know what's going to come through the door. A lot of forestry in Monroe County as well. We've got several logging companies and forestry production companies there in the county. So it's pretty diverse, a lot of home horticulture type stuff, right. and really some commercial horticulture type stuff is starting to become more prevalent as well. And kind of the thing about Monroe and Allen County specifically is we got producers that kind of overlap counties and also overlap into Tennessee as well. So we kind of work with pretty broad range of folks that in Tennessee, in the Fountain Run area, you got Barron County, Barron County, Allen County, Monroe County. So you got producers that could, go to any extension office in those 3 counties and work with those agents. So, but yeah, it's definitely a good county to work in.
Lots of diversity. I think that's one thing. Right here in South Central Kentucky, where we're located, there's just a wide array and lots of diversity in agriculture and the folks that we deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah. So I feel like, I'm the newbie of the group, newbie of the area. Like I said earlier, my name's Colby. We're here in Scottsville. This is where I work out of our home office. I feel like with a lot of our colleagues in Extension, there's several, like Adam, full-time farmers on the side as well. So they have their Extension job, and they also go home and run their own operations. I feel like with me and starting to see some of the newer agents, just because of the trends in agriculture, we're the generation where I'm one generation removed from the farm. As we've seen in trends in agriculture, land sales. So I always grew up around agriculture, but I wasn't one that, lived and worked every day on a farm. But I'm from Bowling Green, so I've got a lot of grain crops around me. Went to high school, joined FFA, and that's kind of where I took off with agriculture. Didn't really have it on my radar beforehand. Was always thinking probably some mechanical engineer or something like that, but joined FFA, fell in love with agriculture and where agriculture could go in the future.
Right.
So went to UK, got my degree, and then I was part of the extension intern program. And so that was a really cool experience. If you're a college kid listening or a high school student getting ready to go, I highly encourage you to take advantage of it. You don't have to, just because we're University of Kentucky, doesn't mean you have to go to UK to participate in the extension intern program. But that was a blast. That's where I met these 2 guys and then got to start working with them. But, man, Allen County is really cool. For those of you who are not familiar with the geography, if you look on a map right below Bowling Green, if you're familiar with Bowling Green, you're going to start on the west end. It's going to be Simpson, Allen, and Monroe are all in a line, bordering Tennessee and then bordering each other. So Allen's really cool. As we kind of move from the flatter ground of Simpson, we get more into the more rolling topography. We have a lot of beef cattle production here, consistently ranked pretty high with Monroe and Barron in the top of the state for beef cattle production. So in turn, we also have a lot of hay and forage production as well. But one where Allen County comes in pretty high is always vegetable production, and Adam knows it well, and I've learned it pretty well. We've got a ton of vegetable production from our cucurbits, our melons and squashes. We've got tons of tomatoes, peppers, and we even have some, more working into specialty fruits and berries as well. So we've got a ton of producers that we work with on the horticulture end here in Allen County.
Yeah, you've got, basically kind of you got 2 large Mennonite communities, and they're a blast to work with.
Right. That's one of the unique audiences. I feel like, every extension agent in all 120 counties has a unique gig that I feel like that they work with. But here in Allen, working with those large Mennonite, and they produce, man. And I like to always say, when I go out there to talk with them, I'm supposed to be bringing the information and the knowledge.
But you're learning.
I'm coming back with more than I went with.
Absolutely.
When they've multi-generations have been working the ground, and that's what they do from the time they're born until the time they retire.
And that's one of the coolest things I think I hope it comes across to folks, is working with the different folks that we get to work with. I mean, we do this to help people, and it's about the people. I mean, that's what drives you, is being able to help your people, really, at the end of the day. And I do want to add one thing, if it's okay. I didn't talk as much on my background prior to college as the 2 of you all did, but I grew up. My granddad farmed, and I actually live on the farm that he farmed on, one of the farms. And I can remember sitting in my house as a kid watching him, shelling corn. And he had both cattle and corn and soybeans. And I can remember watching him come by on the combine, hoping he'd pick me up so I could ride with him. And when I was a little kid, I thought, this is awesome. And I can't tell you how many hours I rode with my granddad, on the combine. I helped him in tobacco. I can remember, so he was a full-time farmer. That's how he made his living. And I was the first grandchild. And so he was like a second dad to me. and I helped them a lot on the farm. Now, it did skip one generation because my dad, he worked on the farm some, but that's not where he aspired to be. Sure. But definitely my love for farming came from spending that time on the farm, which is where I live now with my grandfather, and I helped him quite a bit over the years.
Yeah, I remember whenever I was younger, we had cattle, and then we grew tobacco and all that stuff. That's kind of like you. That's where my love for agriculture kind of began as well. I had a cousin. He was my first cousin. He's kind of like a brother to me, and so that's kind of, he was like 7 or 8 years older than me, and so like growing up with him kind of as a brother, and him on the farm, and then my great grandfather passed away, and then he took over the farm at a young age. My cousin did, and so just seeing him out there working and me going and helping fix fences and
right.
working the cattle and topping tobacco and being in the stripping room, with tobacco and all that kind of stuff. That's where my love for it, kind of began as well. And then, of course, now we live on my wife's family farm with cattle, and then her and I, we kind of do our own thing we grow mums and pumpkins as well. And so that's kind of a new, at the beginning, it was kind of new to us as far as, because, I'd never grown pumpkins before.
Totally different system to what you grew up doing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I was used to the cattle, but the integration of the other stuff, was new to us. And so, of course, we've got 2 kids now. So I'm hoping that their love for agriculture kind of shows up in the future as well. And it's kind of, there's not a lot of money to be made in agriculture, especially small scale. But for me, the agriculture and the passion for it is there because I grew up, with that, and so I want my kids to do that as well. And if they, grow up and want to continue on the farm, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine as well. But I want them to learn hard work and what it's all about, where their food comes from, and all that kind of stuff. So.
And I think it's really cool that, we see it in our work. We've mentioned how diversified our counties are. Used to, when you talked about taking over the farm, you had to, you were, okay, I'm going to grow grain, I'm going to raise cattle. But now there's so many different, and when we're talking about value-added products and specialties within these crops that we can, new avenues opened up. It's not just, okay, I got to take over and I got to raise cows, or I got to take over and I got to grow corn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so much more. I know here in Allen, I know there's some in Simpson and probably in Monroe as well, but cut flower farming. People don't think about it when you go pick up a bouquet of flowers in the store. It's not something you typically think about agriculture, but somebody's got to grow those flowers and make those bouquets and everything like that. So, there's so many different avenues for people to get started in agriculture and find their, little spot that they've got carved out. I know we didn't, one thing I didn't really know about a whole lot when I was getting started, but I realized once I got here to Allen County, it's super big, is our beekeepers. And it kind of ties in hand in hand when you want to talk about vegetable production being so large. You got to have those bees to pollinate those vegetables. And we have a great beekeeper group here that we work with, and kind of learned about that. It's its own little section of agriculture. It's not something that you really think about or lean more towards. If you're in ag studies, you're not going to talk a whole lot about it. But I've learned a ton about beekeeping in the last little bit, all the way from just caring for the bees, honey production, and everything in between. So I feel like we've said, a great group of diverse producers across our counties that we get to work with, and kind of using this as an opportunity to highlight some of the things that they're doing, and some topics that are relevant to all our different groups that we work with. Try to provide them timely information. And I know, Jason, if you want to talk a little bit about kind of what we've got planned coming up for the podcast and some ideas we have for the future.
Yeah, and I know this isn't a direct answer, so I apologize at the forefront. But as we've talked about the diversity of agriculture that we work with, I want to emphasize, and I think it's more important now than ever, because there's so many sources of information out there that we convey. We're liaisons for the University of Kentucky, and we're connecting local folks with research-based information, and we're trying to get it out in multiple platforms, this being one, but there's tons of ways that we're trying to get it out there. But, there's a lot of self-proclaimed experts out there and a lot of misinformation out there. And so I just want to emphasize to people that we have diversity of information, all these different types of producers, all these different production systems, and all these niche markets. We've got information for that at the University of Kentucky. So it's very broad, and we've got lots of specialists and research-based information. So I feel like our work is more important. It's always been super important, but as important as ever to keep this information out there for our producers, because a lot of us know those margins are razor thin on any production level, small scale, large scale, and we've got to make sure that we're getting good, trustworthy information and putting that to use.
And with the integration, of artificial intelligence, so that takes it another step further, right? With, you can just type into Google or whatever the Google AI search engine or any AI search engine for that matter, and it's going to give you an answer. But like you say, it may not be a credible source.
The accuracy is sketchy sometimes.
And so that's why it's very important. I always tell, whether it's a producer or a homeowner that comes into my office, and they say, well, I looked this up on the internet. Well, that's fine, but I always tell them, if you're going to look something up on the internet, make sure that it has a university, whether that's University of Kentucky or whatever university in a different state, that's the land grant extension university that does research. Make sure that it has that that university tied with it, because whenever that it does, then that is research based, unbiased information, and that's going to be accurate information.
And I would also mention to folks that if you're looking at university information, I'd start with the University of Kentucky first if you live in Kentucky or you're local. A lot of that stuff varies by region, so you need to look in terms of timeliness for spray applications or insect information. That can vary based on where you live, but you can trust that the university information is always very credible. So Colby, I apologize for deviating. That was just on my mind, and I really wanted to get that in here. But I think going forward, we're gonna talk a lot about on this podcast what's in the news, because I think that's on people's mind, and that's very important. In terms of agriculture and horticulture, what's in the news, as well as what should be on our radar in terms of timeliness. So I feel like that one point of this podcast is very keeping timely information in front of people that they can use and apply, and also to sort of navigate the waters and discern what some of these topics that are being talked about, in the news are and what the implications are.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing when we're talking about the model of extension. We're county agents on the county level. We've got university-owned farms where we have specialists that hold PhDs in all these subjects. And a lot of times when these new issues arise or when new research is at the forefront, they're the ones that are leading that charge. They're the ones that are doing these research trials. So that way we have new treatment methods for a disease or new growing methods that increase yields. And as that comes down the pipeline, we want to use this podcast as a way to get that information to you quick. Because it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I may be a little biased, but I feel like at the University of Kentucky, we've got some of the best researchers and specialists in the nation, right? Just like, if there's a whatever, topic that comes out that's heavily in the news, just say New World screw barn for an example. As soon as that comes out, our specialists are on it, and when you have an email in your inbox, that day or the next day about whatever precautions or whatever steps that we need to be taken as extension agents to get out to our clientele on what needs to happen, right? And so I feel like we've got some of the greatest greatest specialists and researchers here at the University of Kentucky, and it's definitely appreciative of all the hard work that they do.
And I 100% agree with that. I mean, they're very good and very knowledgeable, and there are times, I will say to our producers that are listening and folks out there, that a disease problem occurs, for instance, and people want information immediately. But now there can be, and it's not a lag, they're researching and making sure before they put that information out. Be cautious, be aware. I know people feel the need when something happens, I got to do something immediately. Yeah. And I get that. But at the same time, before the university puts out information, it's going to be tested, and they're going to know that it's accurate before they put it out there. So in haste to address the situation, I would caution people, don't just run out here and grab the first bit of information you can find, because that can happen in certain instances. Of course, we've been expecting the New World screwworm for quite some time, and so definitely our specialists were ready, and the models indicate that it's been in the United States since 2025, over a year ago, since sometime over a year ago, but we're just now confirming some cases. So, right. But I just want to throw that out there, that I have seen some instances where a new disease or a new something pops up, and people just are grasping for immediate information, and they're like, we need information from the university. Well, we're going to get it to you as quickly as possible, but we've got to go through the appropriate steps to be sure. And that's one thing you can rest assured: the information that comes from the university is going to be credible, it's going to be tried and true, and it's going to be something that you can count on.
Right. And one thing I want to mention too is, of course, we're kind of more focused on agriculture, but we're also going to be talking about natural resources and forestry and some things like that as well. Like at the university, of course, we've got forestry specialists, we've got wildlife specialists, and the three of us, we're all passionate about the outdoors and hunting and fishing and that kind of stuff as well. And so this podcast is not going to be strictly held to just agricultural topics. We're going to talk about wildlife, habitat management, stuff like that as well. And so, obviously we want to let folks know that, if you're not just interested in agriculture, we are going to be, providing information for those that are more natural resource, kind of.
I think definitely with the three of us on the podcast, we're going to have some podcast episodes about some hunting and wildlife management and things like that.
For sure.
And we might even talk about UK basketball every once in a while. You never know.
Maybe.
Well,
maybe a little bit.
I'd say that's very likely. I always say if it's alive and it's outside, then I deal with it. And this is going to reflect that. I mean, and a lot of people, I think, don't realize what the variety of information that we have. And like you said, we've got specialists in all these different areas, and we're going to talk about all that.
And that's what I try to say, kind of like you, if it's alive and outside, we deal with it. But what I like to say is it doesn't matter if you grow one plot of flowers or 10,000 acres of corn, we're here to help you. We want you to be, whatever you're doing, we want you to find success and meet your goals with that stuff. So, like I said, we're going to have tons of different episodes about different topics for all of our listeners. Livestock, horticulture, wildlife, natural resource, everything in between. And like I said, always be sure to, if you haven't ever reached out to your local extension office, if you're listening from outside of just our three counties, be sure to reach out. We've got lots of great agents in the area all across the state, and we'd be happy to help you with all of your needs in agriculture, gardening, whatever it may be. We're here to help.
Yeah, we're here for all our local stakeholders, all our local citizens, and we're just happy to be able to provide these services. And at the end of the day, it's all about helping the people.
Absolutely.
That's right. If you're not in it for helping the people, then you don't need to be in it.
That's right.
So be sure to check us out. We'll be coming back with more episodes here shortly. We want to remind everybody that UK is an equal opportunity provider, so be sure to reach out to your local extension office, and we'll see you next time on In the Field.